Please be seated. Have you understood all these things? I distinctly remember when we read this gospel at the weekday morning prayer service that I started at a previous parish. There was a kid, about 4 or 5, who came with her dad every morning. She usually just colored quietly through the whole half-hour liturgy. So it was a surprise when the lector read Jesus' line, "Have you understood all these things?" And without missing a beat, in that preciously sardonic tone that only a preschooler can pull off, this kid snorted and said, "No." Honestly, it's probably a response that many of us have wished we could give to at least one of the numerous parables that Jesus puts before the crowds. We've spent several Sundays now working our way through Matthew's collection of these cryptic stories. The sower, the wheat and the weeds, the mustard seed, the leaven, the treasure in the field, the pearl of great price, the net full of fish. I won't blame you if you're feeling a bit of what a friend of mine calls parable fatigue. We may be used to parables, especially if we've been around the church for a while, but they aren't always easy to really understand. Many of their images are alien to modern day life. They make cultural references that we don't pick up on. And they're full of obscure and sometimes even directly contradictory symbolism that can easily get jumbled together in our minds when we hear them all together. So when Jesus asks, "Have you understood all these things?" many of us have probably thought what that kid so candidly blurted out. No. But I wonder if Jesus isn't asking a slightly different question than we often assume. We tend to hear this question as, "Have you figured all these parables out?" But I want to suggest that Jesus may be asking something deeper. Have these parables begun to reshape how you see? Have they begun to teach you what God treasures, what God seeks, what God is bringing about in the world? Have they begun to give you the eyes and heart of the kingdom of heaven? Because Matthew could have scattered these parables here and there throughout his gospel. After all, originally, each of these little stories would likely have been a standalone lesson. But Matthew chooses to gather them together, depicting them as one long day of teaching, because together they're telling one story. They begin with God sowing the seed of the kingdom, reminding us that every life of discipleship begins with God's initiative. They remind us that good and bad, wheat and weeds, good fish and bad, are found side by side in life, and that the task of judging which is which ultimately belongs to God, not us. They show us that God's kingdom grows from absurdly small, seemingly insignificant things. They invite us to treasure God's kingdom so completely that we would gladly risk everything just to obtain it. And then Jesus caps it all off with one last image. Every scribe, every disciple who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. This parable can feel like an afterthought tacked on, but I think it actually shows us what Matthew is trying to say by putting all of these disparate parables together. Because taken together, they don't simply give us information about the kingdom of heaven. They slowly train us to recognize it, to value what God values, to seek what God seeks, to hope for what God promises. Jesus is comparing the mature disciple to someone who's been entrusted with the treasures of a house. Someone whose job isn't to hoard those treasures or to use them to elevate themselves, but to bring the treasures out, to share them generously according to what the household needs. This is what understanding looks like. It isn't merely about knowing more or being able to explain confusing symbolism. It involves becoming the sort of person who naturally shares the treasures of God's kingdom. The treasures first revealed in creation, recorded in the law and the prophets, fulfilled in Jesus Christ, and entrusted to his body, the church. Rather than hoarding these precious gifts, the true disciple is so thoroughly shaped by them, so trained and transformed by them, that they naturally share, naturally bring out the treasures of the kingdom of heaven, new and old. So perhaps Jesus' question here isn't finally, can you explain these parables? Perhaps it's more like this. Have these things begun to change your heart? Are you beginning to seek what I seek, to love what I love, to see as I see? Has the seed begun to bear fruit? Has the leaven begun to work throughout your whole life? Are you becoming someone who shares the treasures of the kingdom with the world around you? God has already planted the seeds of the kingdom, and God will bring about the absurdly abundant harvest. Matthew is reminding us that our call is simpler: to keep our eyes fixed only on Christ, asking him to become our vision, our wisdom, and our true word. To seek first his righteousness and his kingdom, willing to risk it all for those treasures. To steward those treasures, letting them transform and train us. And then, with joyful generosity, to bring those treasures out, sharing them with those around us. Perhaps that is true understanding. Perhaps that is what Jesus means when he asks us, have you understood all these things? Perhaps that is a question that by God's grace we can answer, yes.